Hi everyone, Kyle here with Blackline Audio, and today we're discussing how to add external effects processors such as this compressor we have here from our friends at Lindell Audio to your current audio interface or setup through utilizing the Revolution EXP's ADAT inputs and outputs. So the Revolution EXP is an ADAT expander which adds 8 ins and outputs to your current audio interface through its ADAT I/O with very high quality converters, as well as a very high performing word clock that utilizes our patented macro MMC technology, which means that not only does the Revolution EXP expand your inputs and outputs of your current setup, but it will also improve the sound and performance of any of the gear that you clock to this word clock. So a very versatile device and something that becomes indispensable when we're wanting to add more hardware effects processors to our setup and use them as insert effects, because for every channel on a hardware device, we need one input and one output. So if you're starting to add stereo, EQs, and compressors to your setup, you need 2 ins and 2 outs per device, so I/O can get eaten up fairly quickly once you start adding things to your setup. So I'm very excited to talk about this application because I remember when I got into using hardware, it wasn't until I started setting things up as an insert effect that I really started to enjoy it and get the hang of it. Because if you're not using things as an insert effect and you're using hardware, you have to set everything up manually and print all your tracks. And if you want to change anything, you have to go back and record it again. But if we set things up as an insert effect, you can basically utilize your hardware as you would any software plugin, meaning that you can move it around anywhere you would like in your recording chain. So if you would like to put a software EQ before your hardware unit, you can do that. You can put it after. You can really move it around in any way, and you don't have to print anything until you're printing your song. So it's something that I think is very fun to use and very valuable. So first things first, let's look at how to connect our hardware. First, looking at how to connect the Revolution EXP to this Blackline modded Apollo interface that I have here. All right, so the first thing that we'll do to connect our Revolution EXP to our interface is make our ADAT connections. So we'll take one ADAT cable and go from the ADAT out one of our interface and connect the other end to the ADAT input one of our EXP. And then we'll take another ADAT cable and go from the output one of the EXP to the input one of our interface. And now that our ADAT connections are made, now we'll make our word clock connection from the EXP to our interface. So we'll take a BNC word clock cable and go from the word clock output of the EXP to the word clock input of our interface. And one thing I didn't mention in our last video is that if your device has it, be sure to engage the terminator at the end of your word clock chain, and that will ensure that your word clock is operating at its highest potential. Okay, so now that our ADAT and word clock connections are connected between the EXP and our interface, we can see that we have a green sync light on the EXP, as well as the sample rate set to 44.1, which is what our DAW and our interface is set to. And we can see that there's a white EXT on the front of the Apollo showing us that our units are in sync and we have a solid connection. So now that our interface and our EXP is connected, now let's connect the compressor to the EXP. So we'll take a TRS cable and go from the output one of the EXP to the input of our compressor. And then we'll take another TRS cable and go from the output of the compressor into the input one of the EXP. So now that our hardware is set up correctly, the next step is to go into our DAW, into Studio One, and set things up in there. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so we're in Studio One. If you're using a different DAW, it should have a similar way of doing what we're about to show, so you should be able to use what you learn here in whatever DAW you're using. So the first thing we'll do is open our input and output settings and add an input. I've named this one ADAT N1 for simplicity, and we can see if we go down on our list, ADAT 1 is selected and there's an M showing that it's a mono SYN. And I've done the same on the output and made a channel called ADAT Out 1, which correlates to our first ADAT output channel. So now that our inputs and outputs are selected, in our settings, now we'll go to our track, have a drum track loaded up here, then we'll go to our inserts and we'll search for pipeline, and we'll select mono because we're using a mono effects processor. And now we'll set our SYN to that ADAT out channel we made and our return to the ADAT input channel we've made. And we can name the device Lin2A to remind ourselves of what hardware we used if we come open the session later. And now let's test it out. All right, now we'll play some audio. I'll start with the compressor off. On. See, we have meters. And now the beauty of using this as an insert effect is we can add something else. So let's say we want to add a EQ, and we can move that EQ after our compressor or even before if we would like. So that's a quick overview of utilizing the Revolution EXP to set up hardware effects processors as plugins or insert effects. If there's anything else you would like to hear from Black Lion Audio on the Revolution EXP or any of our other products, please let us know in the comments below and we'll be sure to get at it. Thanks.